She's currently residing in Florida. She's going to share with us a fascinating story of Queen Marie of Romania. She was one of the most admired queens of her time, granddaughter to Queen Victoria and Tsar Alexander II. Della is an author and expert on Queen Marie of Romania, as she spent a decade researching that queen's life, and she's published 2 books, her Eternal Crown, Queen Marie and the Baha'i Faith, and Queen Marie, an Instrument in Greater Hands. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to your talk, Della.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for that wonderful musical interlude. I was very privileged to hear 2 concerts that were given in Scottsdale by Brett and his band. So that was really, really lovely. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I have prepared this presentation to be easy to follow also for people who are friends of the Baha'i Faith. Even if you don't know that much about it, I think it's an interesting story. It's always challenging for me to do these presentations because some people have read the book that I wrote that has been published in English, Her Eternal Crown. And so I want to make it as interesting as possible. And the second book that Sharon mentioned is not yet available in English. It's only available in Romanian, but it should be available fairly soon. It's an abridged version of the original book, which is a little bit of more of an academic work because it really contains all of the information that I found. And I believe most of the information that exists. So it's a fascinating story. I really would encourage you to read the book because I think the Baha'is need to know this story. There will never be anybody who will have the position that Queen Marie has, being the first royal crowned head to accept the message of Baha'u'llah. And so I will share my screen. Sorry. Okay. So this book, as I mentioned, is based on the book, Her Eternal Crown, Queen Marie of Romania and the Baha'i Faith. The Baha'i Faith is a world religion whose purpose is to unite all the races and peoples in one universal cause and one common faith. Baha'is are the followers of Baha'u'llah, who they believe is the promised one of all ages. The traditions of almost every people include the promise of a future when peace and harmony will be established on earth, and humankind will live in prosperity. We believe that the hour has come and that Baha'u'llah is the great personage whose teachings will enable humanity to build a new world. In one of his writings, Baha'u'llah says, "That which the Lord hath ordained as the sovereign remedy and mightiest instrument for the healing of all the world is the union of all its peoples in one universal cause, one common faith." The cornerstone of the foundation of all Baha'i activity is teaching this cause. As Abdul Baha, who is the son of the prophet founder of the Baha'i Faith, has categorically proclaimed in his will and testament, the guidance of the nations and peoples of the world is the most important of all things, and of all the gifts of God, the greatest is the gift of teaching. This is a statement by the Universal House of Justice, which is the international governing body of the Baha'i Faith. He, the individual believer, it is, who constitutes the warp and woof on which the quality and pattern of the whole fabric must depend. He it is who acts as one of the countless links in the mighty chain that now girdles the globe. He it is who serves as one of the multitude of bricks which support the structure and ensure the stability of the administrative edifice now being raised in every part of the world. Without his support, at once wholehearted, continuous, and generous, every measure adopted and every plan formulated by the body which acts as the national representative of the community to which he belongs is foredoomed to failure. The world center of the faith itself is paralyzed if such a support on the part of the rank and file of the community is denied it. The author of the divine plan himself is impeded in his purpose if the proper instruments for the execution are lacking. The sustaining strength of Baha'u'llah himself, the founder of the faith, will be withheld from every and each individual who fails in the long run to arise and play his part. This is a statement from Shoghi Effendi, who served for many years as the head of the Baha'i Faith. He is the grandson of Baha'u'llah. And what this passage is telling us is that it really depends on every single individual to do his or her share in order for the promise of the healing of the world and the union of all its people to come about. So this is really, it shows how important this is. And the reason that I introduced this presentation with that statement is because here is a woman, Martha Root, who embodies that particular effort that is required of believers. I have a passage here to read, which was written by Shoghi Effendi. I don't have it on a slide, unfortunately, because I just thought of it now. We are filled with admiration for that unique and great-hearted apostle of Baha'u'llah, our dearly beloved Martha Root, who under trying circumstances and almost single-handed in her efforts has so wonderfully paved the way for the universal recognition of the cause of God. In her case, we have verily witnessed in an unmistakable manner what the power of dauntless faith, when coupled with sublimity of character, can achieve, what forces it can release, to what heights it can rise. I'm sorry, somebody's trying to call me, so let me just turn that off. Okay. So Martha Root was an American journalist. She became a Baha'i, I believe it was 1919. And very quickly, she embraced this notion that she had to share this message with everybody, but she didn't just limit herself to her home country, the United States. She decided that she was going to travel. And this was based on a letter which she received from Abdu'l-Baha, because she was living while Abdu'l-Baha was still alive, and she met him when he came to visit the United States. He wrote this in a letter on 10 January 1919. My hope from the blessings of His Holiness Baha'u'llah is that thou mayest forget rest and composure, and like unto a swift flying bird, thou mayest reproduce the melody of the kingdom and engage in songs and music in the best of tunes. All ears are alert for the summons to the most great peace. It is therefore better for thee to travel now around the world, if this is conveniently possible, and roar out the call of the divine kingdom. Thou shalt witness great results and extraordinary confirmations. So for those of you who may not be Baha'is, this way of writing can seem a little bit strange, unusual, but basically what Abdu'l-Baha is telling her, is telling Martha Root, is that if she does do this, he assures her that she will have great results and extraordinary confirmations. And he uses a lot of language from nature. So you find, swift flying bird, and engaging in songs and music. And so he's asking her to travel around the world. To give you a little bit of an idea of some of the places that Martha Root visited in her lifetime, here's a photograph of her in Australia, another of her in Iraq. Here she is in Germany, and for those of you who are Baha'is, you might recognize Hand of the Cause of God, Grossman and his wife. Here is Martha Root in the middle in Tabriz, Iran. And in those days, women and men met separately. So here she is in Tehran with a group of Baha'is that are male. And a friend of Martha's writes this: and so on she traveled, not young or strong, not beautiful, not rich, alone, and more than once in terrible danger, on and on for 20 years. She had begun these journeys in response to Abdu'l-Baha's mandate to America, issued in his tablets of the Divine Plan. That was 1919. She was the first to arise, and she carried on with her work until far from home she stumbled and fell in her tracks. Here's a photograph of Martha in Japan, and there is, behind her is Hand of the Cause of God. The name has gone out of my memory. If somebody knows, no, sorry, I can't remember it. Here she is in Egypt, and a photo of India, and here in Bulgaria. Agnes Alexander, that's the Hand of the Cause. And here in the Holy Land. Baha'u'llah wrote many volumes during his lifetime. And what is wonderful is that he is the first manifestation of God who has actually left many of his writings in his own handwriting. And the most important book that we have by Baha'u'llah is called the Kitab-i Aqdas, which means the Book of Laws. And in it, he talks about kings, which now in the Baha'i Faith, most of the pronouns are masculine, but they also apply to females. And so whenever he refers to a king, it also applies to a queen. And he says in this particular paragraph, how great the blessedness that awaiteth the king who will arise to aid my cause in my kingdom, who will detach himself from all else but me. Such a king is numbered with the companions of the ark, the ark which God hath prepared for the people of Baha. All must glorify his name, must reverence his station and aid him to unlock the cities with the keys of my name, the omnipotent protector of all that inhabit the visible and invisible kingdoms. Such a king is the very eye of mankind, the luminous ornament on the brow of creation, the fountainhead of blessings unto the whole world. Offer up, O people of Baha, your substance, nay, your very lives for his assistance. And I would like to mention here that the drawing, the painting on the left, which I have lifted out of a larger painting, was actually done by Queen Marie. The wife of Shoghi Effendi, Ruhiya Rabbani, has written a number of books about her husband, who was the guardian of the Baha'i Faith. In it, she says, from the inception of Shoghi Effendi's ministry, she, which is Martha Root, not only turned her loving heart to him, but constantly sought his advice as to her plans. It would not be exaggerating to say they had a partnership in all her undertakings, marked by a mutual love and confidence all too rare in the harassed life of the guardian. They kept in close touch, a flow of letters and cables apprising him of her plans, her needs, her victories, her requests for guidance, and his unfailing answers, giving encouragement and advice. She turned to him at all times, unhesitatingly making requests of him, which she felt were in the interests of the faith. The guardian was well aware of both the purity of her motives and her good judgment, and almost invariably acceded to these requests, which ranged from letters of encouragement to individuals to cabled messages to figures of great prominence. Love begets love. Martha's great love for Shoghi Effendi called forth his love and his response, the way the capacity of a diamond to reflect light captures its rays and casts them back brilliantly. Just a moment, I'd like to take just a quick sip. Here's another portrait of Martha Root. And another paragraph from Ruhiya Rabbani's book. Martha Root was firmly convinced that in her possession was the most priceless gem the world had ever seen, the message of Baha'u'llah. And in fact, all of us Baha'is believe this, that this is a priceless gem that we wish to share with all we come in contact with. She goes on to say, she believed that in showing this gem and offering it to anyone, king or peasant, she was conferring the greatest bounty upon him he could ever receive. It was this proud conviction that enabled her, a woman of no wealth or social prestige, plain, dowdily dressed, and neither a great scholar nor an outstanding intellectual, to meet more kings, queens, princes, and princesses, presidents and men of distinction, fame and prominence, and tell them about the Baha'i Faith than any other Baha'i in the history of this cause has ever done. Marie was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria, and this is significant. Queen Victoria was known as Her Majesty Victoria by the grace of God of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, Queen Defender of the Faith, Empress of India. She married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha on the 10th of February, 1840. They had 9 children, and 2 of them, the oldest 2 boys, the Prince of Wales, who later became Edward VII, and the next son was the Duke of Edinburgh, Alfred, and he is to his mother's left. This is Prince Alfred, Duke of Edinburgh, as a young man. And the reason that Queen Victoria is significant is because Baha'u'llah addressed tablets or letters to all of the kings and rulers of his time, both political and religious. And part of the tablet he revealed to the Queen of England states, "O Queen in London, we make mention of thee for the sake of God, that thy name may be exalted through thy remembrance of God, the creator of earth and heaven. He verily is witness unto that which I say. We have been informed thou hast forbidden the trading in slaves, both men and women. This verily is what God hath enjoined in this wondrous revelation. God hath truly destined a reward for thee because of this. He verily will pay the doer of good his due recompense, wert thou to follow what hath been sent unto thee by him who is the all-knowing, the all-informed." Now, as Baha'is, we believe that that recompense was the fact that her daughter was the first, the reward is the reward of her granddaughter accepting his faith as the first crowned head. Marie was also the granddaughter of Tsar Alexander II of Russia, who was known as His Imperial Majesty, the Emperor and Autocrat of all the Russias. Here is a picture of Tsar Alexander II of Russia with his family. Marie, who was his daughter, was his only daughter. Here she is with her father. She was named Maria Alexandrovna. This is Maria Alexandrovna on her wedding day on the 23rd of January, 1874. She and the Duke of Edinburgh were married at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. Here are the newlyweds. with Tsar Alexander II and Maria Alexandrovna's brother, Alexei Alexandrovich, who was the Grand Duke of Russia. And Baha'u'llah also addressed a letter to Tsar Alexander II. He says in that, "O Tsar of Russia, whilst I lay chained and fettered in the prison, one of thy ministers extended me his aid. Wherefore hath God ordained for thee a station which the knowledge of none can comprehend except his knowledge. Beware lest thou barter away this sublime station. Thy Lord verily doeth what he willeth. What he pleaseth will God abrogate or confirm, and with him is the knowledge of all things in a guarded tablet." Now, what is interesting about these two rulers is that they were the only two who received commendations for Baha'u'llah for things that they had done or that had been done in their name. So they were both being rewarded for this. So to give you a little bit of history on Romania, where Marie, the daughter, eventually ended up. This was Romania in 1893 when she arrived. It's the white part, and it's much smaller than it is today. And I've included at a later time, when I talk a little bit about Queen Marie's contribution to the extension of the country, I've included a map that shows the comparison between this size and its size. Because there was a lot of infighting among the Romanian gentry. Prince Karl of Hohenzollern, Sigmaringen, to come to Romania in 1866 to be installed on the Romanian throne. And he Romanized his name to Carol, and years later he declared himself king in May 1881. Prince Carol of Romania married Princess Elizabeth of Wied in 1869. They had just one child, also Maria, born in 1871, and she died when she was 3 years old, leaving the princedom without an heir. And what's interesting about Princess Elizabeth of Wied is that she was also being considered by Queen Victoria as a possible wife for the Prince of Edinburgh, who was Queen Marie's father. So things didn't work out between them, and they married different people, but their connection after Princess Marie moved to Romania. This is Ferdinand, who eventually became Marie's husband and King of Romania. Leopold, Prince of Hohenzollern, who was the brother of Prince Karl of Romania, renounced his right to the Romanian throne in favor of his sons. His eldest son, William, did not want to become Prince of Romania, so this responsibility fell in 1886 to Prince Ferdinand, who was the nephew of the German-born Romanian King Carol. And he would wait until 1886 to ascend to the throne. And in this time, he had to find a wife and carry on the line of succession. There's a mistake here. It's not 1886. It's I think 1917. So quite a long time. So a little bit about Marie, her family and childhood. She was born at Eastwell Park on the 29th of October, 1875. This is a royal house in Ashford. These are her parents, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, at around the time that she was born. And this is a announcement of her baptism. I haven't yet managed to find an announcement, a public announcement of her birth, but this announcement says, the baptism of Her Royal Highness, the infant princess daughter of their Royal Highnesses, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, was solemnized at Windsor Castle today, which was yesterday, I think it's the 18th of December, 1870, probably 5, at 11:30 o'clock. Here are the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh with their eldest daughter. They had a son before the birth of Marie Alexandra Victoria, who became the Princess of Edinburgh and was also known as Missy. From an early age, she loved to read and write. And these are the first 4 children of the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. And Marie is on the right. Here are Marie and her brother with their father, who was an admiral in the British Navy. And here are the Edinburgh children at play with their cousins. Marie holding a picture of her paternal grandmother, Queen Victoria. Here's a picture where she actually wrote the date on it as 1837. And here is Marie on the left with her 2 older sisters. I mean, they're younger than she is, but she had another sister. And here is Princess Maria of Edinburgh with her 5 children. Marie is the one sitting on the floor. And here's Marie with her sister Victoria, Princess Victoria, in a play called The Vision. This is a photograph taken in what was Princess Marie's happiest time, one of her happiest times, when her father was posted to Malta with the British Royal Navy in 1888 to 89. And it was here that she spent much time with her cousin, Prince George of Wales, the future King George V. Here they are all together, and George is on the far right, and Marie is sitting to her father's left. Here is Marie with her cousin George, Prince of Wales, later King George V. And what is interesting is that there was interest between both of them, romantic interest, but her mother did everything possible to prevent the marriage because although she herself was married to a British royal, she did not particularly like the British royals, and so she didn't want her daughter to marry one. One of the things I found very interesting in reading the biography by Hannah Pakula, entitled The Last Romantic, she made a comment that she believed, and I believe this also, that had Marie married George, she would have had a predefined station as a queen consort, whereas in Romania, as the second queen only, she was able to really fashion her position as a queen consort. So Marie becomes the wife of Crown Prince Ferdinand of Romania, who later was King Ferdinand of Romania. She was also Queen of Romania, and she was the mother of Carol, Elisabetha, Marie, Nicholas, Ileana, and Mircha. I suppose you've noticed that Marie was a very popular name. This is a photograph of Prince Ferdinand Victor Albert Meinrad of Hohenzollern-Sigmaringen, who became her husband, who was born on 20 July 1865. And this is a photograph of Marie at about the time that she became engaged to Ferdinand. This is their official engagement photograph in 1882. She was only 17. And this was the announcement of their marriage to take place on the 10th of January, 1893, in Sigmaringen in Germany. This is Marie as the beautiful bride, and a drawing made of the occasion. Here's the young couple, and I especially like the photograph on the right because it shows them on ice skates. I always find it interesting to see when the royals do things that are like the things that we all do. So here is a photograph of a family gathering between Marie's family and the family of Tsar Nicholas of Russia, who was her first cousin. He was very, very similar in looks to George V. And in this photograph, although you can't see it very clearly, Marie is pregnant with her first child. Her first child being the heir to the throne, Prince Carol, born on the 15th of October, 1893. And here's Marie with her two oldest children, Carol and Elisabetha. And Marie and Nicholas. And then on the right, they're with the King and Queen of Romania. And here are the last two children, Ileana and Mircha. Unfortunately, Mircha died at the age of 3 in 1916, just as the family had to flee Bucharest for the northern town city of Iași. So that was a heartbreak for the entire family to have to bury this young, mischievous, lovely little boy and leave him. I'm very fortunate that I am friends with Ileana's son, the Archduke of Habsburg, and I have learned a lot about the family from him. This is another of Queen Marie's favorite pastimes, riding, and I understand that she was a magnificent horse rider, as one can imagine in the graph. The landscape looks very much like Sinaia, which is a Central European mountainous region. It's absolutely beautiful in the Transylvanian Alps. So if ever you have an opportunity to visit Romania, it's just spectacular countryside. Especially the further away you get from people, the better it is. And these are photographs of the king and queen. Queen Marie loved wearing the national dress and would wear it on many occasions when she was being photographed. This was one of the last photographs and Queen before Carol died at the end of 1914. This is the coronation of King Ferdinand I and Queen Marie of Romania on the 15th of October, 1922. So this coronation took place some years after they actually became king and queen, and that was because of the World War I. This coronation took place in the city of Oradea. Here they are together. And this is a photograph of King Ferdinand with his first grandson, Prince Michael, or Mihai, who just died a few years ago. Picture of the young queen. A painting done by Philip de Laszlo, who was one of the painters, Hungarian painters who did a lot of portraits. This is one of my favorite pictures because it shows Queen Marie writing, and I just imagine her writing her letters to either Martha Root or Shoghi Effendi. Here she is at Bran Castle that was returned just some years ago to the Grand Duke of Habsburg, the Archduke of Habsburg, who I mentioned before is the son of Ileana and grandson of Queen Marie. It's a beautiful castle, very well preserved. And Queen Marie did a lot of social work. Here she is with a group of orphans. Here she is greeting some of the gypsies. Here she is being received in a town by the elders. And she was a very prominent figure during World War I when she helped greatly in war hospitals. She did not have medical training, but she would go, she would read to the wounded, she would hand out gifts, she would pray with them and comfort them, and she was very much beloved by the Romanian people. So after the war, Romania was invited to participate in the Paris Peace Conference, but they weren't having a lot of success in trying to ask for different things from the other powers that were represented at this peace conference. And so they had the idea to send Queen Marie as an unofficial lobbyist. And here she is with the president of France, Clemenceau. And it was she who was largely responsible for the increase in size of Romania. So as I mentioned before, this is on the left is the map of Romania in 1893 when Marie arrived. And then towards the right is Romania, the orange, with its capital in Bucharest in post-World War I times. One of the last photographs of the two, king and queen, together. Here they are with King George V and his wife, Queen Mary. And this is a fun photograph because it's Queen Marie's driver's license from 1909. I think it may be 1909. And one of the Baha'is in Romania, who was actually one of the first to go there before the revolution in 1983, is Vara Enayati, Dr. Vara Enayati, who has been responsible really for making Queen Marie a household name, because he established a huge medical network. And at one point, with the approval of the royal family, he rebranded the name of the network to Queen Marie. So many people say, I'm going to Queen Marie, and then you know they're going for some medical treatment. And Vara Enayati was able to purchase this driver's license at an auction. So here is the Queen seated at the christening of their grandson, Peter, who became king of Yugoslavia. His father is on the left, King Alexander, who married Queen Marie and King Ferdinand's daughter, Queen Marie, who became Queen Marie of Yugoslavia. Alexander was assassinated, unfortunately, at a very early age in Marseille during a trip. The woman in the black is Queen Elisabetta, their daughter, Marie and Ferdinand's daughter, oldest daughter. And then on the right are the Duke and Duchess of York, he becoming King George VI and his wife, Queen Elizabeth. They are the parents of the current Queen of England. And your Queen as well, for those of you who are from Canada. This was the last photograph of the king. He died in 1927. This is his coffin being carried out of Peleș Castle in Sinaia in central Romania. Pelișor Castle, sorry, Pelișor Castle. and Queen Marie and her daughter Marie looking over the balcony as the procession exits the castle. Here they are joining the procession. Their younger son, Prince Nicholas, in the center. And then we come to the part that was actually my inspiration for doing all of this research, Queen Marie's encounter with the Baha'i Faith. Ruhia Rabbani mentioned in a passage in that same book that I quoted from earlier that Shoghi Effendi used to remark that out of his sufferings, something always seemed to be born. He would go through these ordeals by fire, for indeed he seemed to fairly burn with suffering. And then some rain from heaven in the form of good news would shower upon him and help to revive him. This is from a letter of Martha Root to her friend Ella Goodall Cooper on the 19th of February, 1926. She writes, "Next, Bucharest, the American minister said I could not see the Queen Marie of Romania, but I wrote her a letter and sent her Abdul Baha's picture and Dr. Esselmont's book, which was Baha'u'llah and the New Era, which is a beautiful book, introductory book about the Baha'i Faith." This was what the Queen looked like in 1926 when she first learned about the Baha'i Faith. She read a lot of Baha'i books. And in her diary on February 21st, 1926, she writes, "Went to English church with Ileana, but it was what I would call a poor service. I really pray better at home with my Baha'u'llah books and teaching, which have brought me such a message lately. The message, in fact, that I have always been waiting for. It has become a joy and comfort to me and has at last brought God quite near. For the first time, I have felt religion. Every principle of Baha'u'llah is acceptable to me, understandable, of greatest and perfect help. All my hazy desires and thoughts have been suddenly made concrete by this teaching. My whole soul answers it, feels it to be the teaching. I am also giving it to Ileana, for she too is a great searcher and astonishingly open and waiting for truth." In a letter that same day, she writes to her friend Loie Fuller in Paris, "Lately, a great hope has come to me from one Abdul Baha. I have found in his and in his father Baha'u'llah's message of faith all my yearning for real religion satisfied. If you ever hear of Baha'is or of the Baha'i movement, which is known in America, you will know what that is, what I mean. These books have strengthened me beyond belief, and I am now ready to die any day full of hope. But I pray God not to take me away yet, for I still have a lot of work to do." And interestingly, Your Country published this article by Queen Marie in 1926. It appeared in the Toronto Daily Star. And Marie was had a contract with the North American Newspaper Alliance, which would receive articles from her on all sorts of subjects, including her gardens, her castles, her family, what it's like to be a queen. And shortly after she became acquainted with the Baha'i Faith, she decided to write an article about this faith to encourage people to investigate. And I won't read it now because it's a little bit long, but she says at the beginning, a woman brought me the other day a book. I spell it with a capital letter because it is a glorious book of love and goodness, strength and beauty. And here she was referring to Baha'u'llah and the New Era. So bravo for Canada for having received that article and published it in the Toronto Daily Star. And they actually published other articles of Queen Marie's about the Baha'i Faith as well. This is a page from the letter that Queen Marie wrote to Shoghi Effendi, who was at that time the head of the Baha'i Faith. And she says, some of those of my caste wonder at and disapprove my courage to step forward, pronouncing words not habitual for crowned heads to pronounce. But I advance by an inner urge I cannot resist. With bowed head, I recognize that I too am but an instrument in greater hands, and rejoice in the knowledge. Little by little, the veil is lifting, grief tore it in two, and grief was also a step leading me ever nearer truth. Therefore do I not cry out against grief. May you and those beneath your guidance be blessed and upheld by the sacred strength of those gone before you. Marie. Martha Root wrote to Shoghi Effendi to tell him about her meeting with the Queen, and he writes in a letter to her, I am thrilled by your account about the Queen. He invited the Queen and her daughter Ileana to come to visit if they ever visited the Holy Land. And they did indeed decide to make such a trip. And while the Queen was aboard the Mayflower, he cabled her to renew this invitation. And he said, family of Abdul Baha, join me in renewing the expression of our loving and heartfelt invitation to your gracious majesty and Her Royal Highness Princess Ileana to visit his home in Haifa. Your majesty's acceptance to visit Baha'u'llah's shrine and prison city of Akka will, apart from its historic significance, be a source of immeasurable strength, joy, and hope to the silent sufferers of the faith throughout the East. Our fondest love, prayers, and best wishes for your majesty's happiness and welfare. And in my book, you'll see that she had every intention of making that visit to the home of Shoghi Effendi and to pay her respects at the shrines. But she was prevented from doing so by both the British and Romanian governments because they probably felt that it was too strong a message to send of her association with this fairly unknown faith at the time. But what is distressing is that the message that was sent to Shoghi Effendi was actually contained a lie. The telegram addressed on the 28th of March 1930 by Romanian minister in Cairo, Philip Lahovari, to Shoghi Effendi read, Her Majesty regrets that not passing through Palestine, she will not be able to visit you. She did pass through Palestine, actually. Her ship sailed into Haifa harbor. So I can imagine that she would have seen the shrine of the Bab, which would not have had a superstructure at the time, but would probably have been quite prominent. on Mount Carmel, but she probably wouldn't have known what it was. And as soon as they disembarked, they were put in a car and driven into what was then known as Transjordan. And so they didn't allow her to visit any place in Palestine. Although Princess Ileana did remain after her mother left, and she visited Jerusalem, and she did arrive in Haifa at night, and she looked down over the mountain and regretted that she was not able to meet with Shoghi Effendi and visit the shrine. I'm sure that if Shoghi Effendi had known that she was there, he would certainly have welcomed her to make a visit to the shrine of the Bab. This is a photograph of the Queen and her daughter in Egypt and visiting the Sphinx. And I've included this photograph of Lillian Barron McNeil. Lillian was a childhood friend of Marie and her sisters when they were in Malta. Lillian's father was also stationed as a British Navy man in Malta. And what is very interesting is that Lillian became a Baha'i, and her husband was stationed during the British Mandate to Palestine, and she accompanied him on his tour of duty. And they loved Palestine so much that they decided that they were going to settle there after he retired. And so they went around the countryside, and they were looking for a suitable home. And they found what they thought was a beautiful retirement home. And when Lillian told Shoghi Effendi where she was living, it turned out that it was Mazrae. So that was a very wonderful event. And Lillian wrote to Queen Marie about being at Mazrae. Marie first said to her, "Dear little Lillian, it was indeed nice to hear from you and to think that you are of all things living in Haifa and are, like I am, a follower of the Baha'i teachings. And we had planned, Ileana, my youngest daughter, and I to visit the holy graves. Shoghi Effendi was expecting me. Then there were political intrigues. It was after the death of my husband, and people were being nasty with me. And I had, under pressure, to give it up, and it was a great sorrow to me for more reasons than one. Yes, certainly it interests me that you are living in that special house. The teachers so loved flowers, and being English, I can imagine what a lovely garden you have made in that Eastern climate. With much love, Marie. Please give Shoghi Effendi a warm greeting from me." Shoghi Effendi published a yearbook called The Baha'i World annually at first. No, it was, it contained the activities and history over a period of time. It's annual now. And through Martha Root, he asked Queen Marie if she would send an appreciation of the Baha'i Faith. And this was one that she sent. You can see on the right is the envelope addressed to Shoghi Effendi, Haifa, Palestine. And she writes, the Baha'i teaching brings peace and understanding. It is like a wide embrace gathering together all those who have long searched for words of hope. It accepts all great prophets gone before. It destroys no other creeds and leaves all doors open. Saddened by the continual strife amongst believers of many confessions, and wearied of their intolerance towards each other, I discovered in the Baha'i teaching the real spirit of Christ so often denied and misunderstood. Unity instead of strife, hope instead of condemnation, love instead of hate, and a great reassurance for all men. So this message is as valid today as it was at the time. In 1934, another appreciation, the Baha'i teaching brings peace to the soul and hope to the heart. To those in search of assurance, the words of the Father are as a fountain in the desert after long wandering. One of the last photographs of Queen Marie, who passed away in 1938. And this is the last photograph. Here is her funeral procession. And this is the place where she was buried, in a town called Curtea de Argeș. This is the resting place of King Carol and Queen Elizabetha and King Ferdinand and Queen Marie. She didn't want to be buried here, but she had no choice, being a royal. And so she stipulated that her heart should be cut out of her body and buried in her property at Balchik in Bulgaria. Now it was belonging to Romania at the time. And when Balchik became Bulgarian, the Romanians removed the little casket with her heart to put it in a cellar in a museum in Bucharest, where it remained for many, many years during times. And it was recently placed in a niche in the castle in Bran. And this is the entranceway to the council chamber of the Universal House of Justice, which is the current international administrative body of the Baha'i Faith. And a portrait of the Queen was hung in this waiting area. To the left of this portrait is a portrait of King Malietoa, the King Malietoa Tanfili II, who was the second royal to accept the message of Baha'u'llah in Samoa. And at the head of this corridor is a painting done of Abdul Baha. And this is the last message that Queen Marie sent for inclusion in one of the Baha'i worlds. More than ever today, when the world is facing such a crisis of bewilderment and unrest, must we stand firm in faith, seeking that which binds together instead of tearing asunder. To those searching for light, the Baha'i teachings offer a star, which will lead them to deeper understanding, to assurance, peace, and goodwill with all men.
Oh, Della, I'm breathless. How do you pronounce all of those names and keep all the places straight? And what a detailed account, synopsis of from your book. So thank you very much for that beautiful, detailed presentation. A couple people had to leave, and they send their appreciation for the presentation.
Yes.
At this time, I would recommend you grab one more sip of water after
Yes,
all that
thank
talk.
you.
Amazing. I see some hands up already. Della, can you see the hands? Would you like to call on whoever you would like?
Let's see. Um, I I don't actually see hands.
Okay, so Miriam, would you like to ask your question?
Thanks, Sharon. Hi, Della.
Hi,
Hi.
Marion.
How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. Lovely to be with you, really.
Yes, it's so nice to be with you as well, Della. And I just want to publicly announce my VIP status here, because Della and I worked together many moons ago, and that was when she was actually researching for this book. So I remember that she was researching for this book, and so well, for her first book, her Eternal Crown. And I think that I just remember at the time, she said, "Oh, I'm, very matter of factly, I'm writing this book about Queen Marie of Romania, and I'm researching for it." And I thought, wow, that seemed to be something so out of reach to me. And I was like, wow, it was extremely impressive. And then I remember some years later, I went to a Baha'i conference and I saw her book on the table in the bookstore. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I remember when Della was researching for this book. So I have a personal, a personal kind of relationship also with Della, but with this book as well. And I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed your presentation, and I'm such a history buff. And so there was so much history that I think was so interesting, and also so compelling given the recent events with respect to the royals in today's news and what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I loved most about your presentation, and was hoping you would do before you started, was the big chunk of time and attention you gave to the person of Martha Root. And I love that, and I think that the person of Martha Root is such an inspiring and incredibly relatable character. And one thing that makes it so relatable to me is that Martha Root traveled to so many of these places at one point with breast cancer. And she had breast cancer, and she knew it, and yet she continued on, and she persevered in her dream. This was really her dream. And I think that this person of Martha Root, as a single woman, traveling to all of these places. I mean, imagine even today, a single woman going by herself to Iraq, or Egypt, or it's such a it's still today a very kind of risky endeavor. And so back then, so much more so. And I think that I don't want to, and why not? I do want to give a feminist spin to your presentation. It's this power of women. What a single woman in the person of Martha Root, the power she had, just by virtue of following her dream and following what she believed in her heart to be true, and this passion that she was able to impart to everyone, and including a crown, a royal, and the fact that I think that so many of us don't realize the power of the individual, and I think many women maybe don't realize the power of being women without this, being women on our own terms, and working to fulfill our dreams outside of kind of the boxes society has dictated for us. And so I love that. I love that about your presentation. And I love the fact that you highlighted all of that about Martha Root. And I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation, not just because obviously I know you and I know the work that you put into this, but I think that there's so much that's relatable to all of us as individuals. And it was just so inspirational. It was so inspirational to see that, armed with the power of thy name. That's like a Baha'i writing that says armed with the power of thy name. And shamefully, I don't know the rest of it, but it's something like,
nothing can ever hurt me.
Yes. And I think
love in my heart, all the world's afflictions can in no wise alarm me.
Yeah. And that's to me such a, it's such an inspirational presentation. I think that this is a presentation that, young women specifically should be what you should bring this presentation to junior youth groups, but also I think it's so important for young women to understand that there are so many paths that can bring them fulfillment and bring them joy. And I think that this person of Martha Root and the person of Queen Marie of Romania, who is someone who is a human being with needs. All human beings, even royals, people don't really realize this because I think the media has put such an unbelievable spin on everything. But the message of Baha'u'llah and the message of God at any age is for everybody. It's for every single person, and everybody is thirsty for a message from God. So I think I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Della. And I hope to see you again.
Sure.
Marian, we can hear your passion. You are very passionate. That is so, thank you for all of your positive, wonderful comments. Next in line here, because the lineup is growing. You're very popular, Della. We're going to move on to Simin. Simin, would you like to say your question?
Yes, I would. Thank you so much for this presentation. I would like to ask, what happened to the daughter of Queen Mary? Did she become Baha'i, or did she remain Baha'i, or was the message passed in the royal family at all?
So Princess Ileana was very interested in the Baha'i Faith, but she went on to do a number of other things within the religious sphere, which were very far from the Baha'i Faith. So her first interest was Christian Science after she married and moved to Austria, married the Archduke of Habsburg, Archduke Anton of Habsburg, and tried very, very hard to get her mother interested in Christian Science, and her mother was not interested. And then after she fled, she returned to Romania, and then she fled Romania with her family. They went to South America first, and then ended up in Pennsylvania, and there she founded a Romanian Orthodox monastery and became its mother superior. My feeling is that as a young woman, they were two women in Romania with maybe a handful of Baha'is whom they did not know. She and her mother met only Martha Root, and I'm not sure if so. Queen Marie also met Lady Blomfield, and she met one other Baha'i in New York, and Ileana was very much involved with Christian organizations like the Girl Guides, like the Young Women's Christian Association, that were very active in doing a lot of projects. And as a Baha'i, you know, in those days, there was no framework for doing any social activities like that. And so I think that her interest might have waned because she, you know, she was not sustained in her faith. Now, mind you, Queen Marie met Martha Root only 9 times, and at one point I sort of made a calculation of the amount of time that they might have spent together, and I figured that it was probably not much more than maybe 15 hours. Imagine, over a period of 12 years. And you know, Queen Marie had some communication with Martha Root, but you know, the mail went very slowly back and forth in those days. So you really have to admire the Queen for her sustained association with the faith in spite of these obstacles. And I just feel that Ileana fell by the wayside. Now, I have heard that there are some relatives of hers in Germany that have become Baha'is. And her granddaughter, her great-granddaughter, Helen, who lives in England, has responded very favorably to the message of Baha'u'llah. So that may answer your question.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was a great question. Barbara, can I ask you to ask your question next? Barbara, would you like to unmute?
Hi, Della. I loved your talk. An interesting bit of nonsense. The Atkinson family owned the Toronto Star, and the grandson, Peter Armstrong, was a good friend of my late husband's, and we would talk. I would talk to him about the faith, obviously, and he knew about the published article about Queen Marie. So it was really neat. They lived actually in Oakville. There's a big piece of property and it's all been subdivided. But yeah, so that's pretty neat. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I saw that in the chat, and I'm happy that you shared that with everybody. It's very important. We know from the Baha'i writings that Baha'is believe in a life after death for the soul that is eternal. And we know that what we do in this world will determine how pleased God will be with our efforts in this world, in this life, which we consider a preparation for the life of our soul in the next life. Just like the embryo develops in the womb of the mother. And so everything that we do is so important. And so this man's family is surely blessed because of what they did. I mean, they made this message available, the message of Baha'u'llah, to so many readers, and it's just wonderful.
I've lost touch with him, but Mr. Atkinson, the grandfather, was very, very willing to give all sorts of money to people that needed it because he had grown up to be very poor.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Barbara, for that personal connection. So we're going to bookmark the evening with the Smiths. So the Smith started with the music, and Smith, sorry to have you as the last to ask your question. Who's asking the question?
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Learned very much. Della, my question is whether there was a lot of pushback or negative reaction to her being a Baha'i and putting out those favorable messages. You told the story of how she wasn't allowed to stop to see Shoghi Effendi, but aside from that, was it frowned on that she was a Baha'i, or did people not know? Do we know?
Yes, so generally she was allowed to do pretty much what she wanted. She was considered a very strong-willed woman. She had many, many interests. At times, she was considered to be eccentric in her interests. And so, you know, people tolerated her interest in the Baha'i Faith generally in Romania. Some of the members of her family knew well about her association with the Baha'i Faith. And so the incident in Palestine was a result of a newspaper finding out about her association with the faith and printing an article in which they mentioned that she was actually going to come to the center of the Baha'i Faith and make a formal declaration of faith. And so this is why the two governments prevented her from making that visit. So as long as, you know, it wasn't too much of a public statement, she was allowed to do what she wanted. But in that particular case, it impacted very negatively on her.
Thank you.
Hi, Della. Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Given Martha Root's status, or maybe lack of status, I've always been curious about how she was able to get an audience with such prestigious people and royalty. How was she able to do that?
So there are two books that were written about Martha Root, and I'll just mention to you that my dream is to one day write a book about Martha Root that's not so much a travelogue as the two books that exist are, really to try and figure out what it was that made Martha Root Martha Root. She has an incredible station. I've gone into it. I dedicate one chapter of her Eternal Crown to Martha Root. And really, I must say that in the research that I did, I was just awestruck by the person of Martha Root. As Mariam said earlier, she was just, she's unique. I don't know whether there ever will be anybody like her. And these books do talk about her her travels, who she met, and you know, Queen Marie was only one of the royals that she met. She met many, many presidents, and as Shoghi Effendi said in one of the first passages that I shared with you, she just asked for audiences and just prayed and prayed and prayed to be guided to doors opening. And in most cases they were, you know, as she mentioned in her letter to Ella Cooper, the American ambassador had told her there was no way she was going to be received by the Queen, because the Queen was in a period of great distress, and she wasn't receiving anybody. And so one must really believe that this was divine intervention, because she got an appointment with the Queen the very next day after she sent her Baha'u'llah and the New Era. And the Queen actually told her in their audience that she had stayed up part of the night to read that book. So, you know, it's a matter of, okay, so going back to the letter that she received from Abdul Baha, he assured her that what she would do would work out. And while none of us have received personally such a letter from Abdul Baha, I think that we need to think that all of the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi and the Universal House of Justice are letters to us that are telling us what we need to do. And they tell us so often, if you do it, you will be successful. And in this world that is just so terribly affected by the lack of unity, the rampant racism, the suppression of women, to name but a few of the ills, we really must take that to heart and just do what we're being told. And Baha'u'llah will help us. Abdul Baha will help us. We can even call on Martha Root and ask her to help us. I ask her very often for help.
Della, thank you so much. Ali,